This is the KnightShift podcast, powered by Black and Gold Banneret, your home for news and analysis from all UCF Knight sports. The KnightShift starts now.
Well,
this is the KnightShift podcast.
Welcome in, Knight Nation. Of course, this is Kyle Nash, the student of the game, with Donnie Docs, Don Strouble, and of course, the formidable Bryson Turner, also of Knights on SI. We'll give him his props. But yeah, Coaches Media Day just took place this past weekend. A lot of things that went on, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, but they just said a lot of the same things. Not really. Actually got a few things from Coach Frost, Coach Milton. Most importantly, I remembered to call him Coach Milton for moment one. Props to me on that. There you go. And of course, Donnie Docs got in with Alex Grinch, and we all had a little bit of time with varying coaches throughout the space. And, having Bryson Turner essentially as a guest in a matter of speaking in the football space, as with his new outlet and all that other stuff. But let's get right into it. And I'll say this, guys. This time, were there some of the things that Coach Frost said that were part of the same? Yes. But I have to say, him showing confidence might be what's expected with a group that has as many transfers. But I also liked what you said, Docs. You asked Coach Frost about him finding leaders and returners, and just what your impression of what you feel like he's giving us out there, be it the media, be it the fan base, on expectations. I know that there's certain elements with the quarterback room, and we'll get to that in a minute, but, just kind of get your general impression that you got from hearing Frost talking about things heading into the season.
Well, it's all about progress, guys, and Frost is leaning into an old mantra, as is the rest of the program, rise and conquer. I mean, this program has been through a lot since his return in December, transfer portal, NIL, what have you. And now they have finally formed a cohesive unit in the roster that they will have going into the season. And of the returners, he is finding leadership in them as they get adjusted to the new cultural standard that he and the rest of this coaching staff are expecting of them. And it's one of those things where he's gone through so many different activities with these guys, whether it be bringing up a random player in front of the training room and having the team say their name, putting them in small groups and having them do competitions, having them perform it, just fun little stuff, team building exercises, because he emphasized how important it is. And he said it's harder than ever to build team, especially in this environment, but it's also more important than ever. And he seems confident that as long as they continue to grow and build that camaraderie, that they're going to surprise some people going into the season with their togetherness at the very least. I know that we don't know what we're going to get from a talent perspective, especially in the Big 12 landscape, but it seems like this is a cohesive unit that just continues to get better every day with exactly 1 month to go until kickoff.
Yeah, go ahead, Bryson.
I was going to say that's an excellent point there, Don. I remember Frost saying specifically how he mentioned a player. He didn't name him, but a player came up to him and said that this team felt a lot more together than they were last season, which is definitely saying something. And I remember I was talking with one of the assistants during that media session, and he mentioned how he was putting last year behind them, very diplomatic about it, obviously. But I think that the running theme here is that there's definitely a sense of more of a team focused attitude perhaps than it was before. And so, because I remember, I think last season, and forgive me and correct me if you think I'm wrong about this, Kyle, but I do feel like there were certain cases last year where certain people there was some hero ball tendencies at points last year.
Sure.
And so I feel like that in this type of environment, maybe we'll see less of that, or at least not as often, that it's like, the best way I can describe it is like, let's just see, like, chuck it and see what happens type of
Yeah,
thing.
and hero ball was something you called out plenty last year, and I think that's the kind of thing that happens when you find yourself down early and quickly, and you know, you struggle in an opening drive, and then a team scores, and then you feel that pressure. You know, I think the Arizona State game is a fine example of some of those instances that you're talking about. You know, and you know, even though I would still say that that's UCF best game, although some cowards refuse to put that in there for the Bannies, which were still great. I'm just making jokes, Bryson. But make sure you look out for that upcoming later in the week as we do a podcast on the Banny Awards there. I'm sure we'll have Elo for that one there too. That'll be fun to walk through and talk through that. I have some very pointed questions for you about your Bannies though this year, Bryson, so you better be ready. But we'll get to that in case. And I don't know if you're making the same mention, but I think I heard Kenny Martin say something similar about putting the previous year behind them. And as the guy who's the returner, it's I don't think it's a condemnation of the previous group to say that either. I think this is something where if you have a 4-win season, nobody's happy about it, except for maybe Scott Frost, who last when he took over a team was 0 wins. You know, and there's a certain, I find it fascinating that Frost mentioned, hey, last time I took over, we went from 0 wins to 6. Now I'm getting a team with 4 wins, which looking at the tape, it should have been more, something we've said here on the Night Shift podcast. By the way, let's be clear about that. But I think seeing those opportunities to improve with this group is something you I shouldn't say just want, but demand from your head coach, whether it's a guy who's coming back for another 10 year or not. It's a whole other thing. When it comes in particular to that, Bryce. And I don't know if I'm out of my mind in thinking that, but that's certainly the direction I take any of that there too. I think that element was a little different. And I want to get your reaction to this too, guys, just because NIL is a popular topic and it's not going away anytime soon. I found it interesting, and I'm going to be as fair. I don't want to come off like Chris Vanini and corner Scott Frost by saying something that he didn't actually say, something that Bryson Turner comments very well about on Nights on SI. But I had to give you your props. I love that piece, dude. Anyways, so he said, I'd hate to use the term mercenaries, but that's what a lot of guys are. They've come into play this year by way of getting, compensated. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I think it's kind of a doubling down on him, building on a question that I asked him, I think back in the spring, I said something about, has your time in the NFL kind of prepared you for the NIL space? And his response was, I wish that they were similar to NFL contracts, because there would be something to uphold. You wouldn't just be at the whim of a college. He didn't say this whim of the college student part. I'm adding that for clarity. But I think, and then him talking about politics getting involved and guardrails being necessary. I don't think he's reinventing the wheel, but he's certainly remaining consistent on that topic. I don't know. It's we're in that environment where you can wish for guardrails all you want, but you have to plan to be flexible in the meantime. And it looks like Scott Frost has done that. That's what I'll say.
I've noticed fans talk about how Scott Frost is very, very frankness on the matter is very refreshing. I think, like, credit to Gus Malzahn, coach speak can be very important at certain times. But when it comes to this, I think coach speak doesn't necessarily work in the sense, at least when we're talking about NIL. And so I think Frost's frankness about all of it is a very refreshing take. I think mercenaries has been kind of a term, I think, thrown around by a lot of, like, again, fan spaces. So to see Frost kind of acknowledge that, because he has been out of the college game for a few years. So that means he kind of has that similar viewpoint in a way. Mm-hmm. So at least from recency, as far as recency goes. But I'll raise this point. What did the Guardians of the Galaxy start out as?
I see what you're doing here, Bryson Turner.
Yes. And notice what Scott Frost has been doing this entire time. He has been focused on that team building aspect. Yes, these may be mercenaries, but just like the Guardians of the Galaxy, just like Ocean's Crew and Ocean's 11, these guys are, when they go through certain things together, are able to come together through the trials and the tasks that are given in front of them to make a very strong and cohesive unit that can maybe not ignore the money entirely, because obviously it's still an issue, but at the very least you're not maybe you're not thinking about it in the middle of the season as much as maybe some people were last year, that resulted in so many transfers out at that point that it impacted the team. So I think it's a very refreshing take on the matter. And I think that Scott Frost is doing his best to try and counteract it with what he knows is able to work. It's a very refreshing way of team building that I feel like we haven't really seen since his era, if I'm being honest. I mean, Hypo maybe did it a little bit, but.
Well, I'll put it this way. Anything that gets you to compare to either Chris Pratt or George Clooney can't be a bad thing. Right. So I don't know. I'll leave that at that. Docs, let me jump to you too. You talked a little bit with Alex Grinch, who is the main guy on defense, defense coordinator. What did he have to bring to this recipe?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we know about Alex Grinch is he is well-traveled and possesses a wealth of experience in big-time conferences. This is a guy who's coached at USC. He's coming from Wisconsin, and he is just trying to get this new group, especially the younger guys, incoming freshmen or transfers coming from smaller programs, ready for Power 4 football. And it's all about, for him as well, because this is something that Coach Frost touched on. And if I may add to the previous topic, I love Coach Frost's candidness on this topic. I mean, he even said transfer portal was not a fun time in his life, and he's glad that it's behind him, along with
he said, was it the Suns' Andrew Jericho who asked?
He said, I'm mad at you for
asking. That was brilliant.
Yeah, he called him out, but it's an honest question that need to be asked. But
no disrespect to the asking of the question. Completely, yeah. Frost was tongue in cheek about it, as Frost tends to do. Newsflash, but. Yeah. He was doing it back in 2017. I can tell you both that because I was there for it. Okay. Let me be clear about that while we're on the topic. He had plenty to say to the committee about not being considered for the playoff. You know how I know? I asked him about it. There you go. Yeah. So this is not new for anybody out there who thinks he's talking trash on Nebraska. Not that I'm mentioning anything in particular, but go ahead, Donnie.
Yeah. So another thing that Coach Grinch touched on that Frost brought up himself first was balancing that sense of urgency while fostering patience. Yeah. And it is a hard balancing act that goes day to day. And Grinch said year to year, it's something that never changes. It is always a process, especially in this new landscape. You got all these new guys coming in, and you have to be patient with their skill sets and developing them. But also, hey, kickoff is a month away. We blew through spring. We're going to blow through this camp. And before we know it, we're on the field and we're going to be competing for accolades and rankings and a winning record. And those are all things that this coaching staff is tasked with. And with Coach Grinch being one of the many newcomers, he's got to get acclimated himself while getting everybody else acclimated. And so it's just the common theme of yesterday seemed to be just sticking to the process and making progress within that. So that's kind of where we're at. And that was some of the main points I got from Coach Grinch.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the same there in particular. And for all the question marks we have about the offense, at least at day's end, we know that Frost got in there and got a lot of new offensive linemen. You know, I talked with Coach Clark about that and the fact that being in the O-line space is I had asked him about this based on my perspective from dealing with it, my time playing semi-pro. Hold on. Let me flash the Aaron Evans original so everybody can see my credentials again. But shouts to Aaron Evans. He even made it into the press conference based on your question, I believe it was, Doc. So you can check out that short, by the way, on the Night Shift YouTube channel as a side note there. But, Coach Clark mentioned how the group is getting cohesive, even though they're clearly competing with each other for spots. And the perspective he had as a former head coach at App State and the impact of NIL on things was incredibly interesting. He'll be up on Night Shift here in the coming days. You can check all that out there more directly. But what he left me with is, he understands the need to try to find revenue of any sort when you're a student athlete. But obviously, I think the guardrails are something that's universal about the any coaching staff here in the nation. It's good for the players to get theirs, but as Coach Frost mentioned, we're in that $40-50 million space, like the oil money space. Shouts to Texas Tech. Congratulations again to Lee Hunter for his 1.9 mil. But damn, so. And I want to transition to this. I want to get you guys' take of it. I have my thoughts, but I heard Coach Frost in his time mention that if you don't have one quarterback, you have none, right? That old adage. He said he doesn't feel like that with his team, and then proceeds to explain, he's comfortable with any one of them starting, saying all the things that you need to say as coach, frankly. I'm not saying that Frost has a choice. It's not like, well, guys, I got to tell you, one of these friggin' guys is to finally show up, because right now I ain't seeing nothing. This is dumb. I'm over this. Please stop. He can't say that. Even if it were true, he can't say that, right? But I'm getting that vibe that he is. One thing he did say is he wished that he could have decided on who the starter was 2 weeks ago, right? Somebody's got to show up. And I feel like when I hear these lines as inspirational and as much as they belong on the wall, I'm also not reassured at the quarterback position. Am I wrong in my skepticism?
No, I don't think you're wrong. You're doing well to read between the lines. And, these are several guys that we don't exactly know what we're going to get from any of them. I mean, when it comes to Taven Jackson, we know he's a talent. We know he's a big athletic body, but we haven't seen the reps. We haven't seen the game action to prove it. Cam Fancher at Marshall, pretty good. At FAU, had his struggles. And then you go down the list. And so I think it is fair to read between the lines that we're about to be in August, and he said he wishes he could have picked someone 2 weeks ago. Now we are just starting camp. Today was the first day of player action and being back on the field. So hopefully he gets his answer soon. But if we get to 2 weeks from now and, we can still find stuff to read between the lines with, maybe we sound a little bit of an alarm because the last thing we want, guys, is the QB carousel that we saw last year. I
don't think that's going to happen, Doc. I'm not worried about that happening yet.
I certainly hope not. I do think that we will see some installs where Jakari Brown is, doing his QB draws and, more mobile run game situations. Depends. I don't know how the depth chart is going to shape up, but we'll have to see who's going to get that starting job and who's going to be their first signal caller going onto the field and hopefully staying on the field, because that's the thing. I mean, that plays in part in continuity and consistency. I mean, leadership can go all up and down the roster, but quarterback is the most important position, and you need to have that role stabilized, so to speak. So
Bryson?
I will say this, part of the thing that Frost was talking about is he wants the quarterback to make themselves apparent through the team, I think. Because he said when you have your quarterback, your team knows. And
right.
So maybe this is me being a little optimistic, but I think that part of the reason why he hasn't chose a quarterback yet is because he doesn't know what quarterback will do well with his team. Maybe it's not necessarily because each one of them has, not the talent. It's that which talent works with the team that I've got. Because remember, there's a lot of new faces in terms of production on this team. So there's a lot of chemistry issues that need to be worked out. You could probably argue, by the way, that the biggest contributor on offense that's coming back next year is Miles Montgomery, and he was stuck behind RJ Harvey.
Right.
So this is very much a could be a very brand new look UCF offense that we're looking at here, and they need to figure out how to gel together. And the quarterback is the way to do that. But I think we have an idea of like the running backs. We have Jaden Nixon, Miles Montgomery. We got, the wide receivers, DJ Black, Marcus Burke, Sean Beckton. You guys talked to Sean Beckton about it. We know that. But
KnightShift YouTube channel.
Yeah, there you go. So I think it's more about that than anything else. And one thing I noticed early on in practice that the media got to view, which I was over there for, is that Coach Frost had each of the quarterbacks participate in a hurry up drill and each. And so I took him taking that because during that same press conference, he talked about how during fall camp, like it's going to come down to the little things of like, what did you do on certain plays? And that's what's going to end up being, coming down to who's the starter is going to be.
Well, and most importantly, what he said was not making mistakes, right, Bryson? That's the piece.
Right, exactly that. And so, for example, now I know it's day one, so take this with a massive grain of salt.
Nope, we know who it is. Game's over. Let's go. Championship. Woo!
The sequence that I saw, I would say that Jakari Brown looked very good on the run, like he always does. Right. I think Fancher was a solid mix. I would say he made some solid throws. Taven ended up, I think Taven got intercepted, if I'm not mistaken. One of them got intercepted, and I believe it was Taven. And so, to me, I think it's going to be a matter of which one it's going to be. I think if Jakari Brown is able to get a little better at throwing, then I feel like we might have like a Mackenzie Milton-esque type of quarterback on our hands.
Don't do it.
No, I'm not saying he's as good as Mackenzie. I'm saying that he functions a similar role because Mackenzie was a quarterback that would run all the time. And now he had a great arm. I'm not saying Jakari, but I think if Jakari is able to at least function with throwing the ball, then I think that Scott Frost could maybe implement an offense similar to how he did with Mackenzie, where the quarterback run is a lot more of a factor and that it's more of a running type of team like 2017 was.
Here's the piece I'll give you is if there's somebody who is going to, I'm not even going to say it, you're braver than me than that, but somebody who is in the general distant region, state, might even live in the same state, forget zip code, as Milton.
I'm not saying he is. I'm saying that
I know you're not.
His role is similar.
I have to keep my distance safe just so everybody knows that both you and I don't think he's Mackenzie. We have to stress that. Because remember, if you just whisper or casually mention as an aside, don't take the wrong job, I might get framed out of context and things go straight to Hades. See that I'm trying to make sure people don't think, Bryson Turner, that you think that. You see what I did there. But all of the above to say, partner, like, you need intelligence and to know where the ball needs to go. Not even necessarily where to put it all. That's absolutely hugely important. Knowing who the right target is in the right scenario is the biggest thing if you're going to be that type of quarterback. Because you said Mackenzie was accurate. Sort of. He didn't have a great ball. He just knew where to put it and when to put it there. That which is a huge thing. I don't mean to shrink that. But first and foremost, above everything else, Mackenzie Milton was a smart player. Amazing things just happened because he was in the right place before everybody else was. So I don't know. What you got, Don? You look like you're chomping.
I was just going to say, I have been guilty of pushing the stereotype, more so in the NFL, about system quarterbacks. But really, when you look at it, everybody to some degree is a system quarterback. And it goes back to Bryson's point. Who is going to fit Frost's system the best? Who is going to not just nail down the X's and O's, but get the intangibles right? And so much of this comes down to limiting mistakes, but so much of the time, leadership, and I know we keep coming back to this, but leadership and intangibles can carry a team a long way. And whoever is going to take control of not only the offense, but that locker room, especially in arduous times, they're going to be the one that is going to truly ascend. And talent, I don't want to say it's going to be secondary because it's definitely not, but it can't be everything. And so I think he's got an interesting but good problem on his hands when it comes to these QBs.
That's fair enough. I'll point this out, and then Bryson, I'll let you jump. The piece that I've heard throughout the conversations with you fellas here in this pod is, well, golly, there's a lot of potential, and their best player is clearly Miles Montgomery, who, by the way, there's a lot of people out there that think that Nixon should be starting ahead of him. Not exactly a ringing endorsement when you don't have a receiver on the roster that caught a passive production last year. The O-line is completely, for the most part, revamped. And your best player, head and shoulders, is a guy that people are saying shouldn't start. Now, granted, I don't think that's the case. I really do think that this is going to be a good running back core for anybody who remembers UC Fast proper in 2017. Otis Anderson and Adrian Killens both got a healthy share of snaps before Jawan Hamilton got hurt, by the way, in 17. Everybody seems to have forgotten that poor guy, but he was doing good things too before he got hurt and all that. It was a committee system in general. Why? Because fast is tiring. Oh, look, I just ran another 60-yarder. I need some wind. Get this dude in here. And, oh, by the way, varying talents, too, at the position. Some guys are better at banging. Some guys are better at catching and all the other things, without going down the list. But there's an awful lot we're banking on that Frost can bend his system to the player's best. That's where I think the real test is. Bryson, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, Don, from the locker room standpoint, because I remember a question was asked about. I think I might have asked one of the coaches. Can't remember if it was Frost or if it was or if it was Coach Milton. But I remember asking someone about what were the quarterbacks doing from a leadership perspective in the locker room, and from what they said, all three of them were doing quite well in terms of the leadership department. And so I feel like that we could be seeing a bit of a push in that sense, or they cancel each other out in a way. And let's not forget that KJ Jefferson last year didn't just magically disappear from the team after he didn't become the starting quarterback anymore. He was still a captain on the team and still doing that type of thing. He was still very much a presence on the team, even if he wasn't within bounds much later on in the season. So even if a quarterback doesn't become the starter, there's still a case for them to be a very major leader on the team from a locker room standpoint. Now, obviously, it becomes a little bit precarious because, hey, the guy that we really respect isn't getting playing time and whatever. But if you make it work right and you bring the team together enough, which Frost is working on, then that shouldn't really be much of a problem. So I think it's a factor, but I definitely think it's not going to be the end all be all. It's going to be about which quarterback is able to click with all of these new people the best. And by the way, and I'm glad that Kyle mentioned Jaden Nixon, because he actually just got nominated or put on the Maxwell Award watch list today. And so I completely understand actually why people say that Jaden Nixon should start over Miles Montgomery. I completely understand the point. The problem is that they haven't been paying attention to Miles Montgomery's career. He has always been stuck behind a bulk running back his entire career. It was Charles McClelland in Cincinnati, and then RJ Harvey last year. So This is the year where he's actually able, I think, to get a lot of playing time. And even then, it's probably going to be a part of a Frost committee of running backs. But we know from 2017 that just because you're in a running back by committee, if Scott Frost is your head coach, you are still going to eat. Ask Greg McCrae, Adrian Killens, Taj McGowan, Otis Anderson.
To name a few.
Yes.
And I think that we should, we don't even know what he's going to run in terms of X's and O's entirely. Like you said, both of those guys could eat equally, even if one of them is the quote unquote predominant starter, because back to Kyle's point about skill sets, Jaden Nixon, from the highlights I've seen, he's a bruiser. He is not afraid of contact, and he will run it right up the middle. And then I'm sure that Miles will shine in his own way. Who's going to be a better receiving back? They're both going to be fine. I don't even think it's really worth it to have the discussions of who should start over who. I think that things can change on a game-to-game basis until they really get rolling. So,
no, there's something to that too. And I spoke to Coach Clark about this with the O-line too. Part of them wants to keep that tradition of being devastating, running the football alive. That's a badge you wear when you come to UCF and you realize that since Frost got here the first time, this has been a team that pounds the rock with great veracity, and that's what, that's the same thing that gave us, Coach Becton his first time around coming around here. I know they use it other places, but it was a big deal here. No block, no rock. And that physical mentality, as much as we hear about, there was a receiver on the squad named Speedy, for goodness sake, but they're still talking about no block, no rock, right? And which, by the way, for now, Coach Becton mentions that it's Burke, Thomas, and Black that are your current starters for the moment, but who knows what's going to come throughout camp. That too can change. They what I hear from coaches is that you have all these contributors and all these guys that can make a difference. But what that tells me is we have guys who we're listing as starters and first teamers, but that can change still on a dime. And by the way, as somebody mentioned earlier, injuries are a thing that happen too. There's that.
Oh yeah.
Ask Day Farmer. Ask Day Farmer.
Yeah. That a very real response by you, Bryson. No question.
Yes.
So if there was something, well, and I got to address this first, especially since I spent as much time talking with linebacker coach Mike D'Onofrio as I did. That'll be up soon this week here on the Night Shift YouTube channel. Make sure you check that out. But I asked him, I said, hey, point blank, since this school has transitioned to a power conference, an area of focus has been the defensive front, specifically the linebackers, right? Because the defensive tackles, I've written it time again, making the grade after the game on blackandgoldbanneret.com about how your biggins in the middle are doing their job. Either the ends or the backers at day's end up getting finagled. The offense gets off the field too quickly. Biggins are on the defensive big guys are on the field for 40 minutes, and it's suddenly the defense's fault. What are we doing? But from the linebacker standpoint, do you feel like that's still the biggest area of focus for the defense, that defensive front?
I would say so. I'm less worried about the front because, one, you have the two returning defensive ends in Nigel Kelly and Malachi Lawrence. Both of them, we talked to Malachi after practice today. He's really getting in back into the swing of things again, which is a good sign. You have John Walker, who we also talked to after this first practice, coming back from injury. He's a much more mature John Walker from what he says there. So that
he was such a goof off before. I'm joking. No, he wasn't.
Yeah. So people kind of forget about him, I would argue, because we've had a whole season without him. But he did really good in 2023.
If you're an opponent, 100%.
Yeah. So you have him, and and then you have either another defensive tackle returning for injury in Horace Lockett, or you have RJ Jackson.
Yeah.
So, and who I think RJ Jackson more than likely is going to start, and he certainly did very well. I think the defensive tackles are the one you maybe would have more pause about, just because, hey, people are coming back from injury, they're new additions to the team, but they're returning Coach Kenny Martin, and he's the guy that brought in Lee Hunter and John Walker in the first place. So again, I kind of trust him here. And then, so we have the returners on the ends, an all Big 12 honorable mention, Nigel Kelly is, by the way. And then you have the coach with Kenny Martin, the tackles. I think the front is fine. I think the run defense is going to be an extremely important foundational piece of this team, because that was the one thing that worked last year. So, except for RJ Harvey and the running game, like running defense and running attack were really the big things UCF were able to do last year. And so building off of that is going to be very important, because essentially that means here's what we know we can do. Now let's do more. And that's where, and so that more is where the linebackers start coming into play. because there's a lot of new people on this one. So I know from what I hear, I think Kelly Lawson has been really impressive so far at this time, if nothing else, as a leader. I mean, he was on one of the earliest episodes of the UC Fastcast, hosted, by the way, by Miles Montgomery and Jaden Nixon. And you can sort of tell who are either the leaders or the personalities are on this team because of who went on there. Like Scott Frost talked about Dalton Riggs, who introduced himself to the team by doing the splits. And then you have Kelly Lawson, who really opened up about how he really wants to give back to the youth. So if nothing else, it translates into this guy can quarterback the defense and really be a leader in those terms. We'll have to, of course, see on the field. It's going to be, we'll have to obviously observe that during practice and, talk with them and that sort of stuff. But I think at the very least, this linebacker crew is going to have a pillar of leadership on this that they can build off of. And then we can kind of look at the on the field stuff and evaluate that as we go.
Yeah, you mentioned stopping the run. I think the interior did its job, sure. I think the outside had its own issues. And granted, Dotson last year moving from inside and outside and doing all the different things and all that was its own challenge, I'm sure. I know Nigel Kelly gets his props, but we'll see if he can take another step up heading into the coming season to be more of the promised star that we would have expected. And of course, Malachi Lawrence is a leader on this team for sure. But still, I don't share in your optimism in the defensive front. And then of course, but the defensive backs is a very interesting thing too. Obviously getting Braden Marshall back is huge in its own right. Another return from injury who's going to be suiting up here for camp. I think that's a big deal too. I think this is complimentary football that we're asking for, right? If you get more pressure from the edge, which in the quarter century team, Bryson Turner, that conversation we had about placing that for UCF, which again, apologies to JJ Orton for those who still need to hear it, I guess. But I'm still in the space where until there's more pressure on the quarterback, it's harder for me to give the DBs their hard time. Although I did very interestingly hear Coach Harris, who's the defensive backs coach, mention that no block, no rock. That mentality from Becton has actually made his defensive backs more physical. So maybe they'll get in on helping to stop the run where necessary. And we have a more rounded group we see this year taking the field for the Knights. And maybe they knock the ball loose for some guys over the top here. Granted, you still are in a Big 12, but there's a lot of athletic receivers. So that's certainly something to think about. And let me just go around for any last words or any other bows you want to put on this before we wrap up media day here, Don. I know you talked some about hearing from Grinch, but I know you got your turn to talk to Pete Alomar. How was that experience? I have to know.
And excellent. And what a knowledgeable coach who's going to bring a lot to this team. And he just the way that he frames things in different scenarios, it just seems like he's thinking 2 steps ahead and he's ready to play 3D chess with this special teams unit and against opposing units. He's got everything in line and ready to go with how he wants to do it. And that can only be a testament to just years of experience. I mean, we're talking about a guy who coached Christian McCaffrey, for God's sakes, guys. Like this man is the real deal. And I am very interested. He put a lot of emphasis on their kickers, and he really, really wants them to own their role. Like, understand your limitations, but play your role as perfectly as you possibly can. And he believes that if that goes as well as it should, they're going to win some ball games. And I wish that I had the bandwidth in my mind to go back and recall everything he said over a 15 to 20 minute period. But you just have to go watch it for yourself. Cue the bell, Kyle. Cue the bell.
KnightShift YouTube channel.
You can go hear from Coach Alomar yourself. And just what an interesting person. And I think he's going to be a great coach for this team.
Bryson.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I completely concur with that. There's a reason Scott Frost refers to him whenever we really ask about special teams, is that because he knows that Pete Alomar has that situation covered. He talked about how, you want to be good 40, pretty much 50 and in, I believe is what he used, 40 and in even.
Yep.
And so, which I think makes a lot of sense,
The real estate acquisition business. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So it's great to have somebody that is completely and utterly focused on the special teams, because it's all about consistency. I actually heard consistency brought up a lot by the defensive coaches, but in special teams case, especially, consistency is extremely important. And so the fact that Alomar, the special teams, is all he thinks about consistency. And so nothing else, that is going to be something that he is able to preach as special teams coordinator. So all of the defense definitely needs it, but for special teams in and of itself is extremely important. And Coach Alomar, I think, I'm very confident that he will be able to provide that. I'm just excited to meet some of the new faces, because everybody on the specialist is new this time around. He basically had to build an entire special teams unit from scratch, at least as far as specialists go.
The consistency I see, Bryson Turner, you're significantly happier now that they have a coach specifically dedicated to special teams. That's right. Anyways, on that
I love that running joke.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, facts don't care about your feelings. I'm just telling you something I see that's the truth, man. It's that. So I think that'll do it for our recap of Media Day. Make sure you listen later in the week. Bryson Turner not only has the wrap up of the Bannies coming up here, but also the top 50 coaches is winding down there too. Make sure you check out all of that. And if you haven't yet, for the love of Pete, go to blackandgoldbanneret.com. Check out Bryson Turner and Eric Lopez's work as they put together the top 50 coaches. You will be cheering by the time you finish it. I guarantee you that. So for Donnie Doc's Don Strouble, the great Bryson Turner, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. Until next time, everyone, class dismissed. Go Knights! Charge